Multi-year drought led to a record wildfire year in Colorado in 2020. Northern Colorado communities and our water systems have been negatively impacted by the state's two largest wildfires in recorded history: the Cameron Peak Fire and the East Troublesome Fire, both of 2020. The Poudre, Big Thompson, and Upper Colorado River watersheds were all significantly impacted by recent wildfires, and they provide drinking water to more than 1 million people. 2020 was a year that would test our water systems and strengthen the relationships with state and federal agencies who managed the majority of land burned in the 2020 fires. On August 13, 2020, the Cameron Peak Fire began, and in the next 81 days, it would scorch 208,913 acres and become the largest recorded wildfire in Colorado history. More than a year later, the City of Greeley, along with Fort Collins, Larimer County, and the Coalition for the Poudre River Watershed, are leading the charge to mitigate the damage from spreading even further destruction. The water resources and their quality are the number one priority, but more funding is necessary to continue to tackle these immediate challenges.
This fire is a big deal to the City of Greeley, and when you add to it that it was a companion fire to the East Troublesome Fire, which occurred on the west slope in our Colorado Big Thompson water supply, that means that the city has experienced 400,000+ acres that burned in our watersheds this past year in 2020. This is important to the City of Greeley because all of our source water for municipal users originates in these basins. So recovering from the impacts of the wildfire helps us make sure that water remains safe, reliable, and available through future droughts or through future flood events related to the wildfire. So today we'll talk a little bit more about the wildfire and what the city's doing to respond to protect your water supply.
The City of Greeley gets, from this basin itself, we get over half our water supply out of the Poudre Basin. And with the fire, we are now trying to do our mitigation and to keep our water quality going. This 2020, the year 2020, the fire has devastated all 4 of Greeley's water sources. The Poudre, the East Troublesome Fire, which affected our Windy Gap, our CBT, and the Cameron Peak Fire also affected our Laramie River Basin water. So all of our water has been affected. What we're trying to do presently is maintain the water quality that comes down the canyon for the treatment plants. At the present time, when the water quality degrades, we'll set down and we'll shut off our diversion and take water from one of our other sources. And so it's not affecting the quality of water going into Greeley at the present time, but it's an ongoing process, and you're constantly needing to monitor and maintain the water.
A watershed is all the area, all the land area that drains to a river. The watersheds in the Poudre and Thompson River provide water for all of northern Colorado: Loveland, Fort Collins, Windsor, Greeley, and many, many other entities. And so we all have an interest in repairing that watershed. After a watershed burns, the ash, the debris, and the sediment flow off the hill slopes after a rain and create water quality impairments in the river. Bottom line, the river turns black and we're unable to treat that water.
Post-fire recovery efforts for Cameron Peak have been going on almost a year now. Since the fire started on August 13th, numerous stakeholders have been getting together, meeting and planning for post-fire mitigation work to help mitigate some of the impacts that we expect to see from the burned area. This includes increase in erosion, sedimentation moving into the river causing water quality impacts, flooding hazards, and debris flow. And so the different stakeholders that we've been meeting with almost weekly, if not more, includes the City of Fort Collins, Larimer County, other water districts, the Forest Service, Colorado Department of Transportation, and then a lot of this coordination is being managed by a nonprofit called the Coalition for the Poudre River Watershed. And this group was formed after the Hyde Park fire to really bring together all the stakeholders to get post-fire restoration recovery work completed throughout the canyon. So there are a number of steps and permits and agreements that we had to go through in order to actually start mitigation work on the ground. This included getting contractors in place. We had to do a risk assessment that required collecting a lot of different types of data and compiling those and seeing where our highest risks are located throughout the burn area. We also had to get permits with the Forest Service because 90% of the fire burnt on Forest Service land, so we had to get their permission for any of the work that we want to do. And then as well, we had to get various agreements with the other entities that we're working on. So we got an intergovernmental agreement with Fort Collins and Larimer County because we're coordinating efforts, both planning-wise and on funding sources to get the necessary work completed.
Along with our partners, Fort Collins and Larimer County, primarily, is to mitigate the burned areas. And we do that in a variety of ways. We drop mulch from helicopters. That mulch stabilizes the burned hill slopes and keeps the ash and debris from coming down into the river. We set up sediment blocks, which can be trees and wattles that collect that sediment and hold it in place before it can run off. These practices are proven to prevent erosion into our river, but they are extremely expensive to apply.
You'll see the wattles, those white tubes that are laid up on the draw up there. What they do is they retain and stop the flow of the mountain coming down because the mountain has zero capacity now to hold anything on. Everything is burned off. It was hydrophobic, which means it burned everything down to where it made a crust of the soil. So when the rain comes down, it basically is like a skillet, and it just runs down off of the mountain. On the Poudre River itself, we are mulching extensively all along the slopes and through those drainages themselves. And what that'll do is the same as what we've explained slightly before. The mulch will interlock, and then it'll stop the slides and all of the soil being transported down into the Poudre River. When that's all transported down the Poudre River, all of your water quality is gone. It's basically becomes untreatable with the ash, mud, and everything on there.
So in order to mitigate some of the water quality impacts that we're seeing after rain events, we pursued an agreement with a local ditch company. And so what we're able to do is that when the river water quality degrades where we can't treat it, we let that water bypass our treatment plant and give it to this ditch company in exchange for water that they have stored in Horsetooth Reservoir. Because Greeley can take water directly from Horsetooth to its Bellevue Water Treatment Plant, we're still able to treat the same amount of water but not deal with any of the water quality impacts. And so far, we've been able to operate that exchange every time we've seen the water quality degrade.
That trade keeps both parties whole, but allows us to more fully utilize our water rights and to protect our citizens, making sure they have adequate water supply.
While each of Greeley's watersheds have been compromised by wildfire, the city has been able to utilize its vast sources and partnerships to keep the water safe, tasting great, and reliably flowing. The burn area impacts on our water storage and water quality will likely last a decade or longer, and the work behind the scenes will continue. The work plan is to continue to secure grant funding and apply treatments that help the vegetation take root and reestablish stability on the hill slopes. This is a natural process, subject to drought, heavy rain, and snowpack cycles, and full revegetation will take many years.
Ultimately, our goal is to get vegetation to establish on that burned area. That's really the point of the mulch. Near term, it holds the sediment. Long term, it grows vegetation, and that roots will hold that watershed in place. Eventually, we'll have trees that reestablish. The sooner we can do that, the better. And in the near term, it's important to do that because we could suffer some of the flooding and some of the property damage that we've seen in recent weeks.
The cost of mitigating the Cameron Peak fire has grown with burn area flash flooding in July of 2021. While the wildfire recovery work helps to rebuild soils, establish vegetation, and prevent flash flooding, we expect that heavy rains will continue to create sedimentation, debris, and localized flooding for years to come. Today, the total cost of watershed recovery is $45 million for the Cameron Peak Fire alone, and restoration work will take several years to complete. While expensive, these costs are minor to dredging reservoirs, damaged infrastructure, or compromised water quality.
So the aerial mulching program that we have planned is a very extensive project. We're looking at mulching over 10,000 acres throughout the burn area. And so you can imagine that this requires a lot of staff time and contractors on the ground and in the air flying helicopters to make this operation happen. At any given time, there's probably 10 to 15 people on site as this operation's going on, coordinating with the helicopters, making sure that they're putting mulch where we've requested them to put the mulch. And then in addition to that, we have to inspect the mulch once it's on the ground. So there's a whole other team of people out there every day, even over the weekends, checking the mulch, making sure the coverage is appropriate so that it meets all our guidelines for the different funding sources that we've obtained. So it is a very widespread project involving a lot of time and effort from numerous people.
Our goal is to mitigate about 10,000 acres of the 209 that were the most severely burned. We can't do this on our own. And our partnerships with Larimer County, with federal and state agencies, with the City of Fort Collins and others, is what allows us to do this mitigation. We need state and federal partners to help us fund this cost, this giant cost of mitigating this watershed.
So far, the city and its partners have leveraged local ratepayer dollars to obtain more than $16 million in grants from state and federal agencies to assist with watershed restoration. Much of the restoration work is done via helicopters spreading wood shred mulch over the most severely burned areas. The city will continue to pursue state and federal assistance to finish the job to protect the city's water quality and infrastructure. Meanwhile, residents can be assured the city's diverse water resources, storage, and resilient delivery systems will come in handy in times of need. Certified professional water operations are always working around the clock to treat and deliver safe, reliable water, now, through crisis, and into the future.
So the City of Greeley has been blessed with one of the most robust water systems in the West. 4 major river basins collect and deliver water to our citizen customers. And we've always thought the system to be as resilient, redundant, and robust as any across the West. 2020 was a real challenging year for the system and really put it to a test. 2 major wildfires exceeding more than 400,000 acres burned, all within the watersheds that we rely upon, really put us to the test in terms of our ability to deliver safe, reliable water to the customer. Customers have seen no interruption in great taste and reliability of quality. Our water quality continues to exceed all of the requirements at state and federal levels. And we work very hard to make sure that we're protecting our source water in and ultimately the product that we treat and deliver to the customer. So the good news for the customer is they haven't really seen the impacts of these 2 giant wildfires in their drinking water. However, a lot is happening behind the scenes. A lot of resources are being deployed. A lot of partnerships and collaborations are being undertaken. Great work with our state and federal legislators is being undertaken to generate the funding, to do the work in the burn scars, to protect the City of Greeley and other northern Colorado regional water providers for the years to come and generations to come, making sure that the burn scars don't develop further into some other problem that we can't manage. So it's been a pleasure to talk with the citizens today about this problem and about the city's response to it, and we hope you'll bear with us as we work to recover from these 2 giant wildfires, the largest in state history.